Audrey, you ready?
Yeah, you're live.
All right. I think everybody's here. We'll give people a few minutes to roll in as we're going through the intro. But first of all, I guess good afternoon and welcome to season six, episode six of the Blueprints. My name is Marianne Curtis, and I'm joined by three friends and colleagues who are very, very well equipped to talk about the subject that we're going to discuss today, which is the seamless transition between the public and the private sector. And I think I use sort of the air quotes mostly to be a little bit facetious, because it has been anything but seamless for me. I'll let my colleagues and my friends tell you their stories, but I think I can speak for everyone when I tell you that it has been worth it for all of us. And before I introduce everyone, I want to take one half a step back and do what I try and do before every episode and kind of discuss I guess, the intention and the goal behind the episode, and I guess sort of the why, right? And this episode kind of came about because somebody who's known me pretty much my entire career said to me about 4 months ago, said, Marianne, you've never talked, whether it's at the Blueprints or otherwise, you've never spoken publicly about the transition from being a state and federal prosecutor, to what you're doing now at Berger Singerman. And he said to me, looks me dead in the eye, he says, why? And I didn't have an answer. And as anybody who knows me, that's very rare for me not to have an answer. So I had to do some reflecting, and I came up with two things. And one is, for me, the transition was so hard. And when I say so hard, for the first 6 or 9 months, I think it ended every day with me on the verge of tears, because I felt so incompetent. And I don't know that before today I was really ready to kind of discuss in a really transparent, meaningful way the transition. And I think the second thing I sort of realized about it is there's a piece of me that left my heart and soul in that job, being a state and federal prosecutor every day, that I was afraid that if I didn't shed that identity completely and really just try and make this whole new, I guess, life or career for myself, that I would be back within the first 6 months. And not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But I wanted to make sure that I gave this the fair shot of this transition to the private sector, that I wanted to kind of give myself the space and the opportunity. So, that sort of goes into what's the goal today. The goal is, I tried to gather between the four of us, we have very different backgrounds, we have different paths, we have different whys, we have different experiences. And when we were kind of discussing this yesterday and going through everything, I said, guys, I just want to have a conversation in hopes that we say something that educates, advises, inspires, or makes someone feel less alone when they are either thinking of going into the private sector, out of the private sector into the public sector, because I mean, like Lindsey's made a sport out of it at this point, and be able to move fluidly through the two. Um, and perhaps you can use either or all of us as a resource if you're sitting in that space. So with that, our guests don't really need an introduction, but I will do a brief one, and then I will let you get to know them more than hearing about them. But first is Shireen Brueggeman, who was an assistant state attorney at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. She became a statewide prosecutor. Then she opens her own firm and does primarily stateside criminal defense, but also has a component of her practice that is on the civil side with some criminal components, witness representation, injunctions, things of that nature, and is also the secretary of the League of Prosecutors. And next up is Jude. I'm going to sandwich you between two awesome ladies, Jude. Jude Faccidomo, who was an assistant public defender at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office. He got poached out of there because everyone realized what a talent he was. And then thankfully, he realized that he was too talented to hold anyone's briefcase and opened up his own firm where he's with Mickey Ratson, and they have really an incredible boutique practice of, I think it's more or less half state, half federal. And I will say this about Jude because I have firsthand experience. I've never seen someone advocate so hard for his clients, yet do it in a really ethical and professional way. And I would tell you that's really hard to do when you have someone's life in your hands, literally, on the criminal defense side. And he's also was the youngest member or the youngest president, I should say, of the Miami-Dade chapter of the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and also past president of the statewide FACDL. And last but certainly not least is Lindsey Lazapoulos Friedman. And when I said she's made a sport out of going in and out of the public and private sector, I texted her this morning. I said, this is incredible. Like the level of experience that you have accumulated is just, if you told me I had to go back and do this again, go in private, out into public, then go back, and I would just, I give up. I'm nope, I'm waving the white flag. But Lindsey started her career at K&L Gates. I think you were there for about 2 years or so. She clerked for 2 federal court judges, so she goes into the public sector, then says, hey, listen, I'm going to go to the private sector now, and goes works at Colson Hicks, which is an incredible firm, and then says, well, I'm going to go become an assistant United States attorney. I think you were there for about 6, 7 years, tried a bunch of cases, and now is at Holtzman Vogel, where her practice is criminal and complex commercial litigation. And I'm sort of in awe of your ability to go back and forth. And I hope that you share that a little bit in what you're going to talk about today, because I imagine there's people who are also thinking that they're in the private sector and they want to go to the public sector. So with that, I'd like to get going all, but I will tell whoever's out there, we have a concept of what we're going to cover, but this is for you all. So ask whatever questions you have. We'll go off script. We don't really have a script. We have a concept of what we want to follow, but we want to make this useful for you all. So with that, I'm going to kick it to you all, and I'm going to tee it up in this manner. I don't think you can talk about where you want to go in terms of your career unless you understand what's your why. And I can tell you, for me, my why in this profession, and it usually tracks also just who you are and what you value. My why has always been chasing excellence. And I don't mean money, and I don't mean power, and I don't mean fame. I mean just excellence in your craft, because I think excellence breeds success and not the other way around. And so for me, I got tested on that, my why, when I was deciding whether to go into the private sector, because I never thought I was. I was a special assistant United States attorney, sort of hitting my stride. I was trying all these cases. I was loving life. I had made it to the Golden Palace, right? The well of a courtroom in federal court. I laughed yesterday that I was going to die with the American flag wrapped around me in the well in front of a federal court jury. And I went to a fundraiser for a judge. I was just sitting in the back, and I ended up meeting Paul Singerman. Never was planning to leave. And then I had this option in front of me. And I remember talking to who is now a federal court judge and a mentor. And I said to her, I'm not doing it. Nah, why would I leave? Why would I do that? And she looked me dead in the eye. And she said, do you want to be known as a great prosecutor, or do you want to be known as a great lawyer? And I couldn't unhear that. And so for me, it was, I'd rather try and fail than to not try, because that was what was my why, and why I do this, and why I try and do this profession as a profession, not a job. So with that, I'll tee it up. Shireen, why don't you take it, and then Linz and Jude jump in.
Sounds great. So I did not have the courage that you had to jump into civil in a whole new area of the law. Also, I don't have the breadth of experience of Lindsey in the different areas of the law. So I'm very impressed with what you guys have done and accomplished. My why, I think, is doing good for the community and while still making a living. I had always just kind of directly on topic here with the government to private practice. I had always considered myself a government person. So even in law school, I interned at Legal Aid in Hawaii, in Honolulu. That was great. And I worked at a nonprofit, a domestic violence nonprofit, helping women navigate the criminal justice system, but on the nonprofit side. And then in law school, I did a clinic at the at the Brooklyn DA's office. I felt comfortable there. I felt I was happy with, or I was satisfied with the idea that my job was to do the right thing. As cheesy as it sounds, we say it over and over again, but in theory, that is really how we should, prosecutors should feel about it. And criminal law was what I was most interested in law school. It was what I excelled in. And so really it was my last year. I decided to go to be a prosecutor. I just interviewed with all the offices in New York and Miami, ended up in Miami. I ended up, I went to the AG's office. I came back to the state attorney's office in 2020 after a brief hiatus in California, and was in the organized crime unit for the last 4 years of my time there. And I really got burnt out, especially since I was the only person in the organized crime unit for the last 2 years. I didn't see them putting anyone else in it in the near future. I was also not given any compensation for being the extra compensation for being the only person. So I ended up being a little resentful about that, and again, burnt out. I had like 90 plus cases that were active. I had investigations. I had a lot of, I just filed a big racketeering case. I had a bunch of detectives wanting to file more racketeering cases. I was on several on calls, including ones I had to go to the scene, potentially in the middle of the night, like police shooting duty. And it was too much. Or it was just something I was looking for a way out and a transition. And I was concerned about the purpose part. I was worried that going into private criminal defense, because I felt most comfortable making a transition into defense in the criminal realm. I was worried that I would lose some of that meaning. I was worried that I wouldn't necessarily feel like I was doing good for the community. Obviously, for your client, yes. What I realized upon making that jump is that I have the same feeling of fulfillment, sometimes more, because to walk people through the system and hold someone's hand and be their advisor, their attorney, their psychologist at times, is very satisfying. And I think I've been very lucky with my clients thus far. They've been very respectful to me. They've expressed gratitude. And you're still fighting for justice. I mean, I'm saying things that are very obvious to people who have practiced private criminal law or as a public defender. This is very obvious to them. But I think I was thinking that my job as a prosecutor was making sure justice was served. But my role now is also making sure justice is served. And the amount of people that are overcharged, have these ridiculous plea offers, is many. And I've been lucky to have clients that I really have felt excited to fight for and could really get behind it. So,
so
yeah.
Shireen, so it's so interesting that you say that, right? Because
Yeah.
I know that Jude, I know we're friends enough to know that financial was a big reason behind your why. But what's your thoughts on this concept of purpose, Jude? When your why is financially motivated, how do you combine that with the purpose that you had? And then, Lindsey, I'm interested in your thoughts on that as well as to your why.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I just have to say though, I met all three of you when you were prosecutors, usually kicking my butt. So I've had nightmares that look like this.
Live.
Uh, um, so for me, yes, certainly, and we all know this, that the compensation in the public sector is not what it should be, right? That those roles are vital. And state attorneys and public defenders, and somewhat to a lesser degree on the federal side, but still, they're essential to the system, and they don't get compensated nearly what they should. So for me, I have been at the public defender's office for about 4 years, 5 with my CLI. And I was recently married and certainly wanted to start a family, and all of that becomes part of the consideration. I also, on a less noble front than you, Marianne, wanted to excel in the profession. And it's hard to say this, but your point about whether you want to be a great prosecutor or a great lawyer applies also on the defense side. Do you want to be a great public defender or a great lawyer? And some of the best lawyers I know are career public defenders,
Mhm.
but they don't get that recognition. And there's just this sheer ego in me of my wife is constantly telling me you crave accolades, and she's not wrong. So for me, that was a big driving force, just ego. And I'm being as candid as I can. We're all friends here. I think Shireen made a good point about being burned out, but also I think it's a gut instinct, right? And you've got to have a little bit of that in this profession of a little bit of feel. And I have been at the public defender's office. I was trying a ton of cases. I was winning a lot of cases. I was feeling really good about myself. But I kind of got that sense like it's time to move on. And if you start to feel that, and it will grow, don't ignore it. Because if you ignore it too long, you're going to miss that window. And you got to have a little bit of faith and trust yourself, trust your gut.
Lindsey, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I deeply respect Jude and Shireen, and of course you as people and attorneys. So I feel very honored to be part of this group. For me, my why, even why I became an attorney was sort of a combination of a job where I felt fulfillment and service, like a bigger purpose, but really like opportunity and control, an opportunity to change my life, and an opportunity to like control my life. And so each of these moves in my own career have been sort of fueled by one of those two things. And I don't come from a family of attorneys. I didn't know any attorneys growing up. My parents' friends aren't attorneys, and I didn't really even know what a clerkship was, I think, until my, second year of law school or something. So I relied a lot throughout the last 15 years on my mentors. And the first partner that I worked for, she was a mentor towards me. And she said, you've got to do a clerkship. It's going to change your career. It's going to change your life. And so that instigated my clerkships. From there, the Judge Scola, who is also a mentor towards me, said, let's talk about what you're doing next and what long term, what that's going to look like. And then Bob Martinez, of course, at Colson said, the U.S. Attorney's Office is open, the freeze is lifted, you've got to go. And to be honest, once I had left being a clerk, I didn't think I would be back in the public sector. But Bob said to me, if you want to be a successful attorney, part of that is having clients. And in order to get clients, you need to be a competent attorney. And how do you become competent? You go try cases, you learn how to litigate yourself, you take ownership of it. And so each of those steps were about an opportunity and control. And even my most recent leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office, I think Jude brought up a good point that I'm sure we'll talk about more. There is a window where you've been in public service, and if you're going to leave, I think, from my perspective, it's sort of like an 6 to 10 year. And once you get past that, it's sort of like you've learned everything you can. Hopefully, you've done big cases, big trials. There's not a lot left on the table for you to learn or do. And so, in order to go and sell yourself out to clients, you need to not, I guess, wait too long, because you're going to start to become fully ensconced in the public sector world. And I think that's another thing I've learned from each of these moves is that we all are a universe unto ourselves, and we sort of can very easily get blinders on. And if you're a prosecutor, your entire world is federal criminal, and that's great. And it's great to become a master of that. But if that's not possibly the only thing you want for the rest of your career, you need to make sure to keep your foot involved in organizations like Shireen and Jude are involved in, and you are as well.
Gosh, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's so good. It's so good. So like if I and I do want to sort of segue into this whole like timing, right? But if I listen to you all and I'm sitting here and I feel overwhelmed and I'm like, well, I don't know what my why is. I think that the recurring themes from listening to all of you is it's really not different from who you are and what you value in your life, right? And I think a big component of what we all do and the way we've made, and I think we're going to get into this a little bit later on, is the way we've made sort of this concept of whether we were part of something bigger than ourselves. We made that still, and we transfer that over to what we do now, whether it's through community work, whether it's through this, right? For me, this is what this is, right? To be part of something bigger than yourself and to give back. Um, but I think the last thing in terms of the why, when you're figuring out, well, how do I figure out my why? And this goes into timing. For me, it's you take a telescope and look down the road. When I'm having this conversation and I'm, 7 years in, I think we were actually the same time, Lindsey, in terms of how long we were prosecutors. And I was like, well, I feel great right now. Like I am hitting my stride. I am like about to start sprinting. We are good. And then I have to take a telescope and look down the road and you say, well, then what? Right? There has to be some analysis, like how many more homicides are you going to try? How many more, of this? Like, and I think it goes to Shireen's point, which is you kind of want to think through this before it's like you want to leave before it's time to leave. At least in my eyes, right? Because once it's time to leave, sometimes it's a little bit less of an easier or a nicer transition. So I think it kind of goes to my next question. And Jude, I'm actually going to swing this back to you because you kind of mentioned in terms of timing and this. When you're going through this, how do you make the analysis of, because I push back and I cringe a little bit when you guys talk about a window, because I just hate being put in boxes or anything. But I do think there's some truth to it, right? And I kind of want to hear your guys' thoughts on they're moving before you're probably ready, but not moving on other people's time frame. And I'm interested in your guys' thoughts and your own individual experiences. And Jude, I'll throw it to you just because you brought it up, and then interested Shireen and Lindsey, your thoughts.
So I understand, the hesitance to say, well, if it has to be in this time period, because that's never true. There's always the opportunity if you're willing to take it. I think more apt analogy is like a bell curve. You want to be at the pinnacle or close to it when you leave, not on the downslope. And I say that because there's problems on both ends that I've seen. I have seen young public defenders in county court just blowing out DUI trials, winning them left and right. And I've been there, and you start to feel like you can walk on water. You've got blinders on. You're in front of the same judge every day who knows you, respects you. You're kicking butt. You're winning DUIs like nobody's business, and you think you're unstoppable, and you are not. You know nothing. And you have not tried a felony. You have not litigated a felony case. You have not taken 100 depositions. That's too early. I've seen the other side of it, like you said, Marianne, where you're hitting your stride and you start to feel so comfortable. And I was right there. And like you said, I got plucked out, and I like to think I would have been bold enough to step out on my own, but I got poached by another criminal defense firm. And that was probably the best thing that happened to me because it made the decision for me. It gave me that comfort level that not everybody's going to have. So you don't want to overshoot that runway where you're that version of the PD in county court, but only in felony court. And you're trying burglaries and you're trying trafficking cases and maybe even a couple of homicides. Because I will tell you, in private practice, those skills don't necessarily translate, right? My client, and as a PD, your clients were like, the hell with that. That offer's garbage. Let's go to trial. And that's great because you're like, bring them in and I'm going to get this experience. And those are the best clients. My clients pay me a lot of money to make it go away. So it's a very different thing. So you have to understand that the skill set you've developed either very early on or when you're in that full-on sprint are not necessarily going to translate. So you want to go when you're at that peak and you're feeling confident, but aware that there's a lot ahead of you.
Yeah. Shireen,
I think
what's your thought? Oh, sorry. No, no, no. Go ahead, Linz.
that's okay. But I think Jude's right too about like your why is going to change as well. And with your why changing, opportunities. So Jude gave the example of he got married and had children and suddenly he had in addition to your career and your focus and your ego, you also now have these other things that factor into your why. And I think that like that is something too that people should be taking into account. I went back to the U.S. Attorney's Office when my husband had his own firm and we didn't have children. So like we could make that decision. And so I think, a lot of young people maybe who are listening are thinking about the career side of it. But I do think that your why is sort of multifaceted, especially as you get older and you reach some of these life milestones.
But Linz, here's the only thing, right? And here's what I struggle with in that, because yes, ironically enough, we both have gone through those life cycles.
Right.
And I think this concept that you can't have it all, right? The amount of times, I don't know if this happened to you, but I imagine this happened to Shireen, this happened to Linz, this probably happened to you, Jude, too, where people will say, well, I just kind of have to do it because financially and people will tell you that if you go to private practice, particularly you go to civil, and that's where your soul goes to die, right? And it's like concept that you have to choose. And I think the message that I'm getting that's at least for me ringing loud and clear, and it's definitely true in my career has been, and I'm interested just to put a bow on this, Linz, in terms of your thoughts, but if you do have to make those real life, my why has changed, right? It doesn't mean that you lose a component of yourself. Those core values can be transferred to, and even like like the humans you work with, how you work with them, what you do outside of work. Sometimes you don't like the work that you do, but and candidly, you're happy because you work with great people, or you get to do stuff like this, or you get to work on, so I'm interested in your thoughts in how you still can deal with life realities either way, right? You going into the public or going into the private and still maintain your sense of um your why, right? Like the core why, and not the one that evolves of the life's reality. So just interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the someone told me early on, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And I think that is right. Like some days I'm a great mom and other days I'm a great lawyer. Sometimes I'm like mid both, I don't know. So like I think that's part of it. But one of my whys was control of my life. And so I chose to have my children when I was at the US Attorney's Office, where you have great leave and where you truly can take your leave. In private practice, when you have your own clients, which to me was the ultimate goal as an attorney, was having my own business, having my own clients, you don't get the same sort of, I'm just going to step away for 6 months. Good luck with your case, because they're your clients and you need to and want to talk to them, whenever they need you. So I think that I chose to control when I was going to try to make sort of life choices that did impact my why long term. Fascinatingly enough, now that my children are a little bit older, I have more freedom as in the private sector than I did at the time I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, where you're 100% in the office, where you're in trial all the time. Now I can work from anywhere. My schedule's my own. So it's hard to, predict that, and you can't necessarily totally control that. So my suggestion to younger attorneys is just to control what you can. And I think part of that is sort of making job and family choices in conjunction with your partner. I think having a good partner is crucial. Both your life partner and your work partners are crucial. And those are things that you hopefully can control and will sort of help you reach your ultimate why, as you go forward.
Yeah. Shireen, tell me about your timing, your sort of views on timing and how to hit or not hit, the sweet spot
Right,
for
right.
you.
Yeah, I can tell you how to not hit it. Um, So, well, first of all, to kind of go back to the why, I had already talked about my why in general and the one that has been continuous up until today. But I would say what really changed around the time that I was feeling a little burnt out at the state attorney's office was flexibility, as Lindsey is talking about, and the fact that obviously because of COVID and things became virtual, a lot of, there was a lot more opportunities there in terms of Zoom court and virtual appearances. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to go out on my own, as scary as it could be after being so entrenched in the prosecutorial world. I'd taken a break for 3 years, moved to California, took a California bar, did my thing there. So I've been a lawyer longer than 15 years, but I was actively prosecuting for 15 years. And so I thought, hey, when you get to this point, I never intended to become a career prosecutor though. When I started, that was never my intention, but I also didn't have an exit strategy, and I didn't have a plan. I was just like, as I went through my life overall, it's always been, how do I feel now? What do I feel like is the next step, as opposed to planning 5, 10, 15 years ahead. Those interviews where they ask you, what do you want to do and where do you see yourself in 10 years? That would have been a problem for me, right? So maybe I avoided those. I think at some point I was getting a little envious of defense attorneys who would tell me, oh yeah, well, I'm going to handle this case. I'm going back. I'm going to go to the pool. And, I'm not saying I do that every day. I'm just saying that it sounded like such a breath of fresh air to be able to have my own practice. And I'm solo, so I don't have a partner to give things to. So obviously, you're flexible to the extent, and I think Marianne, you had pointed this out prior to today, that when you have flexibility, or when you're handling a private client load, that you have responsibility to be you have to be responsive, you have to be on top of your stuff, you have to make sure you're organized. That can be tough. You're not on anyone else's clock. You're not on anyone else's schedule. You have to be diligent, and you work when you need to work, or when it's good to work, not just when you need to, but, and that's how it goes, and it ebbs and flows. And what I love about it is, the government mindset is not the mindset, but the reality is, no matter what you do, you're paid the same amount. So when I just had more and more work being piled on top of me, I didn't have any incentive aside from, I guess I'm helping the community more. And sorry, after many years of that, I was just, okay, enough,
You're like, I'm tapped out. I've helped.
Yeah, I'm tapped out. At this point, if it's a slower week or a slower month, that means I have more time to myself. And that's wonderful. I love that. And then when I'm working, my time is being valued monetarily. And I've really never been motivated, actively, very, very strongly, by making money. That was never my top thing, was to make the best living I could. It was really a sense of purpose was my driving force, but obviously we need to make a living. But the idea that I could be on my own schedule, and when you're solo, it's all you, or even if you're private with, in your own firm, you can choose whether or not to not take a case. So if you feel like my output, the quality of my output is going to go down if I take more, because I'm going to be overwhelmed, I'm going to have too many things to juggle. Or if you know that you have a really big event coming up, it's your father's 80th birthday or something, and across the country, you're gonna do what you need to do to be there. And if it costs you a case, then that's what it is. But you're in charge of the risks and the drawbacks, or not the risks, but the benefits and the drawbacks of taking on more work, or leaving it there and referring it out to somebody else. So yeah. It's funny. Sorry, I did want to make the point that I definitely thought my time was not up, so to speak, but to leave. And somebody who was in the narcotics unit, Jessica Casso, I'll name her. She left the office after about 20 years. And her and I were very close. And so when I would see her after, she was very happy. She was very happy. She was thriving. And I thought, okay, I'm not saying that I have all the skills Jessica has, but I'm like, if Jessica can do it after this many years and make it work and she's happy, then I can do it too. And she has been very supportive, to me, having left the office, in sort of a mentor, big sis kind of way.
Yeah. And I do want to get into substantively sort of the pros, cons, and what you all have experienced sort of as you've made that transition. But to sort of bring this full circle, I think the things when you talk about timing, and I'm sitting back listening, I'm thinking one, the recurring theme is control, right? To be able to control when it's time to go. And I think it's hitting that sweet spot for me has always been figuring out you can't always make the 10-year plan because like I laugh. My wife always says, you plan for your plans. I generally make 10 like decade plans, like 10-year plans, and then every year from there. And you won't always know how things are going to come out, but I've always tried to make the next best step. And so it's taking that next best step without knowing the next four or five, but like having a pretty good gut that I've been able to kind of go through this. And I sort of will kind of put an end to this in the sense that I was listening to this podcast that is so contra to what I think we've always thought about. And what we're hearing about now is like giving yourself a lot of grace and like, just like kind of roll with the punches or whatever. And I think there's something to be said. He said, I think we've kind of given ourselves almost too much grace. Sometimes move. It's amazing what you will do and figure out when you just move.
Right.
And so when you're deciding, oh my gosh, should I move or not? The only question I now ask myself is I get real quiet and I say, is that my voice or is that somebody else's? Is that my wife's? Is that my mom's? Is that my brother's? Is that somebody else? Or is it mine? And if it's mine, it's time to go. If it's someone else's, then I need to like get quiet so that I can figure out what's my gut. And then after that, then we move. And when we say move in whatever, decisions. So with that, I think I want to transition substantively to your all's experience because I think if I am sitting here in, and I took myself back, well, 8 years, yeah, 8 years ago, I think the things that are going through my head is this is probably, at least for civil, this is probably where my soul is going to go to die. I'm not going to have the same purpose. I'm going to like somehow get into them, just going to be one of many, right? Because like there's 100,000 lawyers and all, they're all doing some form of civil complex commercial litigation. I don't even know what that means to this day when people say that. So I think I will kick us off, and then I'm interested in your guys' thoughts in terms of the pleasant surprises and then the hardest things that you did. For me, the hardest things that I had to deal with was I went from running major trials and calling the shots and being able to Lindsey's point, control how things were going to be tried, when we were going to be doing prep, what was the strategy, to literally Googling what an interrogatory was. I've said that in the past. Like I literally Googled, like I'm like, this is what I have been relegated to. And there's some level of ego and pride there that I'm like, if I do this for the seventh straight day, I don't know that I'm going to make it. But eventually that turned around, and I think the most pleasant surprise has been, and certainly now, right, when you have your own book of business, is every day's different. Like I laugh, one day I'm trying a case and the next day, like I had to try and help sell a yacht one day. Like, and it's like, I have no like skill set specifically for that, but I have a lot of other skills that will help do that. So, that's sort of just like high level, my experience. Jude, talk to me. What was the difference when you kind of came out, like the hard things and the I guess pleasant surprises?
Well, all right. So the hardest thing, and if you're a prosecutor or especially if you're a public defender, so that's the purest form of law, right? There's nothing corrupting it. Your job is to zealously represent your client, go to trial if necessary, get the best plea offer. There is no other consideration in your mind. There's no, did they pay their fee? Or why is is this worth my time? Or if I'm going to trial for this week, am I going to miss these other cases? is my trust account up to date? Are my phones ringing? So the biggest shock to your system, and to any prosecutors or PDs who are on this and are thinking about leaving, I encourage you, in the time before you do, enjoy what you are doing, because you're never going to have that level of purity in your practice again. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It comes with upside, and I'll get to that. But the biggest thing is you're going to learn that you may now know how to be a lawyer or a trial lawyer, but you don't know how to be a business person, and you don't know how to quote a fee, and you don't know how to run a law office or have human resources or keep the lights on. And you'll go 1 month where you're like, I'm making a fortune, to another month where you're like, I'm going to starve. The phone's never going to ring again. My kids are going to be begging for change on the corner. And so what is most frightening is what you don't know. You will figure it out, and it will come with some bumps, but where you are now is about being a lawyer, and that becomes very different if you go into a private practice on your own. Now, I was fortunate because I had an intermediary. I was hired as an associate to a criminal defense firm. I've never had to learn civil. I never want to learn civil. It scares me. I think I got a C in civil procedure, and that was a gift. So I went to a private criminal defense firm, and I got to see somebody do what I didn't know how to do. And I learned as much as I could from that. One thing I will caution some of the younger lawyers who are considering going out on their own about is, don't take a partner just to make yourself feel warm and fuzzy, because that happens, right? This is your trial partner in the PD's office. The two of you have tried a bunch of cases. You're having a blast. I want to go out on my own, but I'm scared, so let me bring this person with me. Make sure the person you're bringing with you is bringing something to the table. Because when I went to start my own firm, I had a partner, and she very much brought more to the table than I did. She had far more experience. She had an office set up. She had a desk I could sit at, which was great. And if you bring in somebody who's just there to make you feel comfortable because you're scared, all you're doing is splitting your profits. 9 out of 10 of those partnerships end with a friendship ending and resentment, and you go your own separate way. If that person, let's say you go out on your own without that person, and you have a trial coming up, and you call them and you say, hey, will you second share this? And they say no. That's nobody you wanted to be friends with or partner with to begin with. And if you can't find somebody to call to help staff a case, because I know in the state attorney's office and the PD's office, that's a huge thing. And it's such a value to be able to walk next door to a lawyer who's been doing it longer, say, what do you think of this? Guess what? That doesn't go away. I'll put my number in the chat. You got a question, call me, and I'll answer it for you as best I can, or we'll figure it out together. There's always going to be that person there for you. So back to your point, you got to understand that there is going to be this transition period where you are absolutely terrified, and you're going to get through it. There's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. And eventually, just like Marianne's now at the peak of civil practice, even though, 7 years ago she was Googling interrogatories, you'll get there too.
Linz?
I mean, I think everything Jude said is absolutely accurate. But I guess I think the good stuff is, like, you're gonna feel like any job, there's good and there's bad. I think it is really hard when you go to civil to leave. As Jude said, the criminal world is the purest practice of law. You are so tied to the Constitution every day. It is, especially in the federal world where there's no depositions, it's very contained. And then you go to civil, especially state civil, and you are like, your windshield just got like strawberries thrown on her. It's something insane. It's like crazy. And thank God, my husband, who, like I was saying earlier, the best decision I made in life was having a good partner. And the first month, I was like calling him constantly, being like, what does this mean? How do I do this? What's next? Because it's wild. But I mean, when you get to be old like me and you've done a bunch of different things, it's to your point, Marianne, you've got the skill set. It's down there. Maybe you haven't done this exact thing, but you have your own skill set and you have a community to draw on, whether it's your partner or it's someone like Jude who you heard speak or something. You can always reach out to someone and say, what does this mean? The other thing that was a really rude wake-up call in civil, and not everyone is like this, but it was the first civil case I brought in, and I filed something, and the attorney calls me and says, maybe even said it in an email, I can't believe you made such a false statement to the court. And of course, I had made no false statements to the court, but no one in criminal ever would have said that to me ever. Like, people are so much more collegial in the criminal world. They get along a lot better. I think part of it is because you are focused on the law and the case and you're not worried about some of these other things. But the civil world has a very mean-spirited, difficult side to it, that I don't care for. And I am trying my best to not be that way, because it doesn't have to be that way. Even when you have a contentious case, you can still be respectful to opposing counsel. So those were, I think, some of the sort of like negative things. I think the positive things is it's so fulfilling to feel like you can get clients, to feel like this person trusts me and believes in me. And it's so motivating to do a good job for somebody, when they trust you. And when you do get a good result, it feels really good. The hard part about being a lawyer is, especially on the civil side, we are not typically money makers. Maybe if there's some sort of contract dispute and you win, but we're not really helping the business bottom line for the most part. And so I think a lot of times we are a pain in everybody's butt, even our clients, or we're constraining them a little bit from doing something they want to do because we're giving them advice about what the implications might be. And so I think that's hard, to feel like you're the Jiminy Cricket on the shoulder, sometimes telling someone to dial it back a little bit. But I think the good thing is you can see the role that you're playing and you can see the impact that you're having. And you know that based on your experience, it is the right thing, or you hope it's the right thing for the client. So.
Yeah, and it's I want to use the last 10 minutes because I try and end on time always, to kind of go through the question that I love to ask everybody anytime anybody will listen to me. But I will say on that point, Linz, I think some people would say, they ask, Marianne, are you an optimist? I was like, no, I'm delusional. Like I am delusional. Anytime someone says something negative around me, it's like, challenge accepted. Let me see if I can flip it. Because I think so much of our existence and our energy and our frequency and our happiness and everything is based on, how you attack those moments. And that's the first thing, that was the hardest thing for me to deal with when I first came over, because everything was like, I would just invite people into my office. Jude, come look at my file, take a look at it. Like, I'm not going to beat you because right. Like, literally, no, here's my file. I'm not going to beat you because I have some like sneaky fact. Right. I'm going to beat you because either A, I'm going to out-lawyer you, or B, candidly, I just have the facts on my side. And that was a big like rude awakening for me at times, until I sort of started to take the approach, and I just, it's the concept of using your same skills and transferring them over, and just refusing. Like, I reject how you practice. I like literally rejected how people practiced with me. And I kind of got to the point where I said, and I would literally say this to the other side. I said, sir, literally 3 months ago, I was litigating whether someone was going to live or die. I was like, we can get through this discovery dispute a little cleaner. And you'd be surprised how many times people are like, oh, okay. I was like, so like you're at a 10, I need you at about a 3. So let's dial that thing back down. And so I guess the only point that I would say to that before I like shut up and give you guys the sort of the final words, but is whatever you love about where you're leaving, bring it. You can go to another place and bring it. And but like the point is that all of that is accurate. It's just there's ways to frame it. And I experienced the same thing. So with that, guys, I'm gonna ask you all the question that my dad always asked me, which is, knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently, or what do you want people to know that are in this position? And I would say for me, it is that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the State Attorney's Office and to serve was the privilege of a lifetime. What made it so great, and what I don't think we all realized at the moment because it was sort of subconscious, was the community and the idea that you were part of something bigger than yourself. It just kind of goes without saying. You don't realize that you're all 24 and 25 at times, and like you're all idiots, and you're all going down the street or down the hallway and figuring it all out. The people that you work with, and I think when I moved, what I would have done, what I did well was I did bring a sense of community and a bigger purpose. But I think what I would have done is leaned into that a little bit more in a more transparent, vulnerable way. But to Jude's point and bringing this full circle on that issue is like my ego got in the way, right? So, I didn't start this blueprints till 2 years in, and I really stayed on very substantive topics instead of inviting people in. And I wish going back that I would have leaned in and let them see sort of the process to get here, as opposed to trying to now look back and say, I mean, that's what this year has been about for me, and that's what this platform has been about for me. So I would say, if you're thinking of moving, move with the same vulnerability and community, because this profession can be so unforgiving. And what makes it so great to me is our ability to create that community, what Jude always says to me, which is, we live in Miami, and the worst thing someone could say to you in this profession is when you walk in a room, who is that? And that's the idea, is that we all are going to feed and be resources for each other, and it just makes everything about this profession that much better, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector. So with that, I guess we'll go down the line. Jude, I'll pose the question to you, and then I guess Shireen, and then we'll end with Linz.
Well, I think if I had to impart some closing advice to someone who's looking to transition, and I know I'm the career defense lawyer on this webinar, but I'm gonna offer some advice to the prosecutors who may be considering leaving the office. And it goes into what Lindsey was saying, and what you just said, Marianne. Miami is a very small community. There's tons of lawyers, but it's very small. So my advice to the prosecutors is be nice to the defense lawyer, okay? Because, and I readily acknowledge many of us, myself included, are irritating, grating. Some are rude, some are impolite, some are unethical. Be nice to the defense lawyers, because from one day to the next, if you decide to go out on your own, you're going to walk into that courtroom and you're going to walk to the other side, and you're still going to be that same person. And we remember, and that's a really lonely place to be. More importantly, if you're going to do what Lindsey did or what you did, Mary, and go to one of these major firms or transition into civil, know this, that when it says Assistant State Attorney or Assistant United States Attorney on your resume, that managing partner is going to call their friend who's a criminal defense lawyer. So I would say, maybe once every 2 months, I get a call from a managing partner of a major law firm who I've been on a committee with, I went to law school with, I went out drinking with, who just knows me and says, "Hey, do you know this state attorney? And if you do, what do you think of them?" And it's sad to say, but I have changed the trajectory of careers, both for the better and for the worse, with the answer to that question. And when I say be nice to the defense attorney, I don't mean give in to whatever they want or just give them the plea that they want. I mean, if it's me, yes, do that. But I mean, be friendly, be polite, understand they're doing their
Don't be an
job.
asshole.
Right.
Don't be an asshole.
Mary,
God.
you and I have been friends for 15 years, and that friendship started on a case that we had against each other where you heard me out, you listened to my argument, you had that smile on your face, and you said, "Jude, I'm not buying it." But you did it the right way. So be nice. That's my advice.
Be nice. I like that. You know, there was a book called All the Things I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. You know, it's like,
Amen.
don't steal things, don't take someone else's lunch, be nice. Anyway, I'll try to be quick. I would echo the importance on relationships, not just, you know, finding a, you know, husband that is great at civil law, but, you know, if anyone knows of anyone, I'm single, but only a civil attorney who can help me transition. So I think just back to how long it took me to leave, I think the benefit of that is that I was able to develop a lot of relationships I wouldn't have otherwise developed, partly because I'd been in division, so I was in front of the same judges over and over again, but also specialized unit. I was in a bunch of different courtrooms. And I think I was able to build some credibility and a reputation for being honest and trustworthy. And, you know, Jude has such a phenomenal reputation for being a defense attorney for so long. I didn't have at this point, I've been out a year and a half. Didn't have that privilege at this point of being a defense attorney for so long. So really I had to build a lot of that up while I was a prosecutor. So, and the defense bar was very welcoming when I left the office. They were saying very nice things to me and saying they'd be very supportive, and they have in fact been supportive. And one of the things that was so wonderful was I thought, you know, there's not going to be camaraderie. I'm not going to be able to go to the office and walk down the hall and ask someone's their thoughts or bounce ideas off of them. However, you know, there's like these defense attorney chats that people are helping each other with, you know, everything from what's the Zoom code to this courtroom to here's my case. Does anyone have any thoughts on the strategy for XYZ, or does anyone have a go by for this motion? And the support, it's really a major support network and system that I've found wonderful and a very soft place to land. And I've also maintained my relationships with the prosecutors. Like Marianne said, I'm still on the League of Prosecutors as secretary there. And those relationships are not just colleagues, they are friends. And so having all of that it's a very relatively, for me, it was a soft place to land. And a lot of that I owe to all the years I did spend as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
So
All right,
relationships. Maintain your and be authentic. People can tell when you're just trying to kiss up, or when you're, you know, you're just doing it to network. But, you know, have real relationships with people and be a good person.
All right, Lindsey, close us out.
So the only thing I would add, besides sort of authenticity and relationships and being practicing with dignity and integrity, is just work, you know, focus on your skills, get a skill set, do good work, and the opportunities are going to start to come and present themselves anyways. And some of it you're going to just have presented to you, and you're not going to have to force it. So just do good work, be a good person, build your relationships, and the opportunities will go from there.
So, well, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day, and for those that attended. I think I speak for them that you've got 3 new folks that will help you in whatever way that you all need. So grateful to everyone for joining, and I look forward to the next one. All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
See ya.
Marianne.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.